Hello, welcome to Enots Engineering. I'm Alan. I was in the workshop cleaning my lathe when I started to wonder how much swarf and dirt is hidden behind the apron. The apron is the part of the lathe which is just under the saddle and holds the levers for the half nuts, gears and the traverse system. There are also a number of points on the apron which are oil points, and I was wondering how much oil got in and whether the parts are worn. The lathe was manufactured in the 70s and I've never removed the apron or the saddle. So imagine my surprise when I removed the apron and found a manufacturing fault which had been built into the lathe from new. So let's go into the workshop and see how I removed the apron and saddle and how I rectified the manufacturing faults. And what I wanted to do today was have a look behind the apron to see how much dirt or swarf accumulated over the last 40 years. I've never taken the top off this since I've had it. I believe these are oil points, but in my book about the lathe there's nothing to say what they're for. So I thought I'd take the top off, take the apron off and have a look and see how it works. And the first thing I need to do is remove the carriage lock. This is one I replaced. I made this one myself. It's just a bolt that clamps up with a piece underneath. So I'll unscrew the carriage lock. You just unscrew this . It's just a bolt. Originally it was a bolt with a hexagon on, so I replaced it for this one with a lever so I can lock it without having to find a spanner. And underneath there is this clamping plate which clamps onto there, so when you tighten the bolt through there it just pulls this up and clamps under the bed. To remove the apron, which is this front part, you need to get the top off. So to do that, just take an Allen key and remove the two cap heads, one each side, that hold the two parts together. Obviously these are in Imperial, as this machine was made in the early 70s. It was all made with BSW, BSF threads. So to take the top off, or the carriage off the top, at the back there is under here is a bar. Let me see if I can show you. I've slackened the cap heads off, the two cap heads underneath here. They hold this strip underneath. You don't have to remove it completely, just slacken it off. What this strip does, it stops that tilting on the lathe, so it holds this down, and there's just a small gap between the strip and the bed just to stop it tilting. Once you've slackened the screws off, you can lift the top off in one piece by lifting the front, moving it to the back, and that takes the whole top section off. Then you're left with the apron, which is fixed to the lead screw. Let's have a look inside. I'm surprised how little dirt there is inside there, considering I've never taken it off. But you can see there's a hole here which is a tube, and another one here on the front. These are oil tubes, and on the inside it drops some oil through this tube into this slot and through a hole in the end that feeds down to the lead screw. I think there's something wrong with this one. I can't see the slot going through the hole. And on this feed tube the oil comes through into a hole in the top of this bracket and feeds a traverse. Now you also have an oil nipple on the side which oils the hand crank, which is there, and at the bottom there's another oil cap that you can fill a reservoir that lubricates the traverse gears. This is still fixed onto the lead screw, so to take this unit off the lead screw I need to undo the lead screw. Now I've just removed the gear train from the end of the lead screw.
Now the only thing holding the lead screw is this block on this end. If you've got space, you could just take this block off and wind it off the end. I haven't got the space to wind it off, so now I'm going to take this block off. And try and pull the lead screw through. Using the rack and pinion, I can now pull the lead screw through till it comes out. There we go. And now I've got the lead screw with the apron still attached. I'll take that over to the bench. I've supported the lead screw on 2 blocks of wood each end, and I've supported the apron on this block of wood underneath. So now we can have a look inside. Now, considering this was made in the 70s, I'm surprised there's not more swarf and dirt inside. You can see we've got some swarf down here where it would collect, but most of the gears fairly clean, which is not bad for nearly 50 years. On the oil side, the tube that we showed on the other side comes in here, look, and drips oil onto the traverse mechanism, which lubricates the mechanism and the lead screw. And then this side, the oil comes through here into this trough, puts oil down between the 2 half nuts when you're screw cutting. And if I turn the handle, this part here engage with the rack. The rack's still fitted to the lathe, so this engages on a rack. If you turn the handle, it moves the whole unit backwards and forwards along the bed. So the next thing I want to do is take the lead screw out. I'm hoping I can just pull it straight through. Now we can see better. The first thing I'm going to do is get a brush, get all the dirt and muck off this, clean it up. I've just sprayed that with some brake and clutch cleaner and it's come up quite clean. But what I do want to do is remove some of the parts and give them a proper clean. Take away the hand wheel first. The hand wheel's held in with this small circlip. These are circlip pliers. Take the circlip out. Now that should pull through when I undo this grub screw on this side. There's a second grub screw on the top shaft, because you can't take the bottom one out without removing this one, so I'm hoping I can get the shaft out. Now this one should come out. We'll undo the 4 screws on the bottom plate. Just undone the grub screw and taken this pin out at the top, which holds this gear with a circlip. This has a drive pin through to hold it in. I've tapped the pin from the inside with this pin punch. And now I'll see if I can pull it out. That's free. I can unscrew this. It's just a nut with a pin through it, and that pin takes the drive for the traverse. It looks as if this screw's been removed before, but this screwdriver's too small. So what I've done is I've got a washer, because it's an extra wide slot. A standard screwdriver would slip on that. So I've got a washer, filed it to width to fit this slot, pushed it in. Then I needed to stop the back turning inside here. So what I did was got some old circlip pliers, put them into the slot. And now I had a feeling this would be a left-hand thread, so I just turned it as if I was tightening it up, and holding it, it came undone. So it's a left-hand thread on this. I can take this out now. Need to tidy this screw up because it looks a mess. But that's a left-hand thread. It's just on a screw. Unscrew that. Now that should all come through. This part is a clutch mechanism for the traverse. So I'm getting to clean that. There's no dirt inside the clutch mechanism. The screws for the pivot points on the half nuts, you can use the same washer. I haven't got a screwdriver that wide, but the washer fits that, so that does another job. And I've noticed on this, there's the hole there for the lubrication, so any oil that comes can come through there. On this side there's a hole in there for the lubrication, so when you put oil through, it drips into this groove and lubricates this pivot here, and it's supposed to lubricate this. But as you can see on this one, when they moulded the sand moulding for that, the sand had broke away for the end here. This is solid steel, so no lubrication will get through to the half nut. So what I'm going to do is mill a slot in here just to put the lubrication to the half nut. Okay, ready to reassemble. So I'll start with the handle for the bit of oil on there. There's a plunger there, spring loaded, that goes into the hole. And I've just been looking at this oil filler here, and all that does is puts oil in this reservoir at the bottom here, so the gear wheel that goes on here will rotate in the oil. This hole in the end of the shaft is another oil way. It puts oil into the centre of this gear. So I'll put this on next. Has a and I'll just line the marks up. You can see the two marks there where the grub screw marked it, and the grub screw's on the top there, so tighten up the grub screw. Okay, the next part to fit is this gear goes onto there. So the shaft on this one's got another oilway on. So the goes there. You have to put the gear on first, push it back in level, tighten the grub screw up on this side. Just to hold the shaft. And then to stop this coming off, circlip goes on the outside of this gear. brushing everything down with a small toothbrush just to make sure there are no bits of swarf or grit in the part. Just put the traverse assembly through, which goes through here. Make sure the screw goes on this side to hold it in position. Just check that the clutch mechanism works. See there, the centre stays still, and then when I tighten up from the other side, it locks the centre, so it'll turn all the wheels. This will drive the, sorry, this is the saddle driving along the carriage, the other one's the cross slide, and then in neutral it won't have any effect on either. So what I'll do is put the plate on here, cover the parts. It doesn't need to be too tight, there's no pressure on it. Put the worm through. Goes through there. And that's locked there. Just back it off. Pin should go back in. And the next part to fit is the lever for the half nuts. This is the bottom one because it hasn't got the groove in it. And the bar goes through there. And this pin on here locates in this groove. And on the other side there's a washer and a nut. And on this side I've got this screw to fit in the middle. It's the left hand thread. Just stops the handle unscrewing. That's ready for going back on the lathe, except for the machining of the half nut. I've now found out the main thing I wanted to find out is what all the oil holes do, or if they are oil holes. So that's an oil hole for the half nuts. That's the oil feed for the clutch mechanism. There's another oil feed here for the spindle and the gears for the traverse. There's another oil feed there for the bushing here. There's an oil filler at the bottom there. That fills the reservoir on the other side. This is an oil hole here. That oils the top gear. And the reservoir is at the bottom on this side, which oils the lower gears. You've got 6 oil positions on the apron. That's all ready to go back on the lathe. The next job, I'll just clean down the lead screw and ready for reassembly. Okay, I've fitted the lead screw through the apron and the feed, some oil on the gears, and I'll fit this onto the lathe. Well, I've fitted it all back together, so the next thing is to look at the top slides, fit the saddle back on. Okay, there's the underside of the cross slide, the saddle. This is the strip at the back, bolts on there, that holds the saddle down on the top, stops it lifting. And there's the two V-ways. The cross slide nut. So this gear here fits onto this one on the top. I'll put all I need to do now is put the two screws through there to hold the apron to the saddle. If you forget to tighten the back, you see still lift. This machine the whole way on this part. Now I've got the lathe working. I've already drilled out a couple of holes and I'm just going to mill straight up through those two holes. I've just set up for milling the slot in the half nut bracket. I've put my adapter plate in, the compound slide I've moved here. I fitted the vise in the tool slide, put the part I want to machine in here, set a dial indicator so I can see how much I'm feeding in, and I've marked the compound slide, and this black line meets there and it goes to 0 on the top. I want the height I want. So now we're ready for milling. I had to take the saddle off to put the arm in with the half nut on. I just put a washer on there and the nut. So when you work the lever to engage the half nuts, you see it coming up and down. Normally that would be there. When you oil through this tube way here, so as you put oil through this, drips into the slot in the casting and moves along the slot that I've just milled in. There at the end is a hole. The oil goes down there and goes into the lead screw nut. When you disengage the lead screw, this lifts off and oil runs back in and feeds the pivot point. So now I can put all this back together and that's finished. gauge the crevice, slightly touch up. You can see the top one started, the bottom one's working. Well, that's it for today. I hope that's useful, and we'll see you next time on Enots Engineering.